Etienne Brule, Death of the Torture Tree. Brule sat himself at the foot of a tree. His aching head was pounding like the beating of a giant waves on a rocky shore. More than once through the day, Indian eyes had glared at him with what seemed like hate, not a friendly smile for a week. Even the children turned away from their eyes as they passed by. The hardest thing to understand, boys and girls only swarmed around him and begged tales of old France, and then knew of great white chiefs who wore shiny crowns on their beautiful white queens, who dressed in long white robes, had rings in their fingers with stones that sparkled like shining water, and their pierced ears brilliant ornaments that flashed like fire. Why should the little ones avoid him now? Why should he care? He shrugged his shoulders. The sun was setting over the hill to the vast west. The whole sky was so crimson that it made him think of blood. Why blood? Brule looked about uneasily. Not a Huron was in sight, save a few squaws who were lighting fires under the flesh pots near the torture platform, the gruesome pile of rocks which held in place a charred tree trunk. Eventually, they were preparing for a feast. Perhaps a hunter killed a deer or a bear, or possibly it was just a fat dog, or maybe one of the traveling war parties had captured an Iroquois warrior and brought him home for the torture. He had watched the Hurons kill their enemies many times. He had never learned the delight of the screams of the victims as their flesh was torn from their bodies or the fire touched and applied to their bare skin. A horrible, fantastic thought flashed into his mind. Could it be he, Etienne Brule, was to be? He dared not finish the thought. Again he reached for his jug and swore that he found it was still empty. A comely young woman came toward him. For some months she has been his favorite mistress. Not long ago he had discarded her in favor of a younger, even lovelier maid. He wondered what she wanted. Come for a walk with me, said Onessa, the pretty flower, softly. No, you will not need your thunderstick. You will be quite safe with me. I have something to tell you. Brule straggled to his feet, looked uneasily toward the squaws and the flesh pot, then walked unsteadily down the path with the daughter of the chief of Hurons. Take me in your arms again, my love, she pleaded. Brule never could resist the soft eyes of a shapely woman. As he pressed her to him, she whispered, Ingagwa Saha, I am carrying your child. Laughing loudly, Brule pushed her from him. What silliness is this, my pretty blossom? He demanded. When was a Huron woman ever sure of the father of her first baby? I don't know that it was our custom to love freely, going from one man to another as fancy leads, replied Onessa warmly, but it did not happen so this time. Since I lived with you, I have not known no other brave. Somehow I seem to belong to you, and you alone. I boasted in the village that I held you as one had no one else held before. I hate that ugly crow that you put in my place. What damnable nonsense, exclaimed Brule roughly. Don't bother me with such a tittle-tattle. That brat is yours, not mine. Leave me alone. I say I don't want to see you anymore. Get out! The girl's black eyes flashed with hot anger. I could have saved you. Now I will not if I could. Brule did not hear the ominous words. His keen ear had caught a sound of movement in the trees. Then suddenly 100 yells from 100 red throats. 100 painted savages rushed from the darkening forest. The Frenchman reached for his thunderstick. Too late, the savage hand knocked it from the resting place against the stump. With an oath, Etienne Brule straightened himself and clenched his fist. A Huron reached and grabbed his arm, and he fell squirming to the ground, yelling with pain from a kick to the stomach. A mighty fist to the chin, and down went another, then another. Come on, you red rats, shouted Brule. You know now that he was fighting for his life. Take that! The fourth savage went tumbling to the earth, unconscionable from the hard contact with the Frenchman's fist. "Rush him from behind," called a pretty flower. "But do not kill him, not at once. I want him to hear me laugh at him as he laughed at me." A half-dozen Hurons closed in on Brule. From the rear, others were wary of the attack of the front. Stout kicks and flailing arms sent 3 more Indians to the ground, but the odds were impossible, overwhelming. It was in a few minutes the white man was bound hand and foot and dragged to the torture tree. From every longhouse in the village, old men, squaws, youth, maidens, little boys and girls came running. Never before had they had a chance to jeer at a prisoner with white skin. "Let me go, and I will never come back," pleaded Brule. "I will give you my furs, my thunderstick, my wampum, everything." "Ho, ho, ho!" shouted Hurons bravely. "Listen to the white-skinned whiner who had such much joy of our women. Hear the howls of the black-hearted dog who sold his master, the great white chief, to his enemies. The dirty beast must die." "Ho, ho, ho! The beast must die!" echoed 500 savage throats, little and big. "Let me go! Set me loose!" threatened Brule. "It is all right to torture and kill other Indians, but if you put me to death, the great white king will take cruel revenge. He will send mighty fleet of war canoes armed with thundersticks. They will kill all of you and burn your village." "Go! Let me go! Set me loose!" threatened Brule. "Is it all right to torture and kill other Indians?" "Ho, ho, ho!" they laughed, and he soon squirmed. The Hurons had no fear of the French punishment. They had heard from Amplicock of the angry words spoken by Champlain at Tuscot. They wanted to prove the white chief who had mercilessly come back that day they were not disloyal. Even if they had been forced to trade with the English in his absence, by killing Brule they would wipe out their guilt. They commenced the dance of death by the haunted music of the Indian drums. In slow rhythmic procession, the Hurons formed a ring around the torture tree. They lifted their feet high. They bent their bodies low. Their cry struck terror in Etienne Brule's heart. The drum beats came faster. The pace quickened. Soon all the savages of all shapes and sizes and ages were circling the white man, screaming melancholies at him. "Sing!" they shouted. "Let the great woman lover sing and show her his courage." No sound came from Etienne Brule's lips. "Let Onessa, the pretty flower, tie on the birch cords and light the fire," commanded the chief, her father, and she, discarded mistress of the poor white devil, did as she was told. As the flames shot up and scorched his bare legs of their victim, again the savages shouted, "Sing and show your courage!" Again, not a sound. All that night, Brule was tortured to make Huron holiday. First, the Indian women had their way. Many of them had reason to hate this man at the stake. More cruel and cunning in their tortures than the males, they lighted torches and touched them in the most tenderest parts. Then they hammered sharp awls into his ribs, bit off what remains of his fingertails, and pierced his ears with sharp sticks. Then came the men, took over. They lifted his scalp and poured hot water on his bleeding head, cut his wrists and pulled out his tendons, tore strips of living flesh from his bones, handling them to the children to pass and turn to the dogs, and all to the tune of jabs and mocking. When the victim fainted from the awful pain, they lifted the water to his lips to reveal him. When moaning came up, there was still life in the broken body, but no consciousness. Brule's torturers were not yet ready to have him die. Onessa, the discarded one, at first watched her former lover suffering with joy. And why not? She made a fool of herself by boasting of her power over him. And when he cast her aside, all the village mocked her. Holding her peace, she had thought to win him back. She knew she had been sentenced to death, and she wished to warn him. Again, he pushed her away, bidding her bygone, and when she told him to come, she had a child. If he had been kind, she might have, but no. He was cruel, brutally cruel. And when the chief, her father, baited her to light the fire, she was glad. She laughed at his pain. She taunted him like the other women. The hours rolled by, then she remembered that the broken, burning body on the torture tree was a man whose arms she laid in so often, the father little one stirring in her loins. What matter if he had humbled her? He had suffered enough for his shame and her shame. He was, at this time, he should die. So she could bear no longer. Climbing the stone of the torture tree, axe in hand, she cried, "He is mine! He is mine! I kill him!" And she crushed his bruised and bleeding skull with one blow. The rest of the tale need be told. Cannibal feasts do not make pleasant reading. The wages of sin were paid in full by Etienne Brule.